Okay, I'm ready. Welcome to Positivity is the Way to Go. He is an award-winning producer with expertise delivering well-executed live sports broadcasts. Welcome, Raymond Smaltz to the show today. How you doing, man?
Very fine, Dion. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I seen your resume, man. I was like, man, he was on Fox, he was on ABC, you know. Then we obviously we gonna break some of that stuff down, during the interview. But let's get started. What was it like to work on a major historical boxing matches such as Holyfield, Tyson 1 and 2, Mayweather, Pacquiao, and how did you manage the pressure of high profile events?
Well, those events in particular, those boxing events in particular, came after, many, many years of me being in the business. So, live sports television is about pressure. And so, if you've been in it as long as I had been in it, especially starting in the early 1980s, which is when I began my career, um, you get a lot of exposed to a lot of pressure situations. And so at that point, boxing was no different than any of the other sports that I had done. In particular, those two events leading into the Holyfield Tyson fight. The first fight between them was an upset. No one ever expected um, Evander to beat Mike. And as a matter of fact, that fight was originally supposed to take place a year or two, if not a couple of years earlier, but because of whatever the situation was, maybe it might have been even at a time when Mike was arrested and incarcerated for a period of time that fight was postponed. And so the first fight was interesting, but the second fight was the one where Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear. And I can remember being back in the slow-mo replay area, which was my responsibility at the time. And once we saw Evander start jumping around holding his ear, everybody was like, "What happened? What just happened?" Nobody had any idea what happened. And so one of my guys that was on the machine that does the slow-mo replays alerted me and said, "Ray, take a look at this." So he, took back then we were still using videotape. So it was 1 inch tape. So he was spinning it back and he showed it to me. And I was like, oh my God, I think Mike just bit Evander Holyfield's ear. And sure enough, that's what happened. And so I think it was Mills Lane was the referee at the time, and he had no idea what was going on. So he had no reference, like he didn't see the ear biting, right? So when he brought the guys back together again, and Mike and Evander came together and they were hugging each other or holding each other again, Mike bit him a second time. And then the second time he spat his mouthpiece out. And at that point, then Mills Lane stopped the fight. So it was one of the more dramatic sequences that I've ever been around in boxing. And it just, it made Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield part of boxing lore because of all the stuff that went on. When it came to Mayweather Pacquiao, quite frankly, I think that fight was 10 years too late. You know, people had wanted those two guys to fight for many, many years, and they couldn't figure out, money and location and things like that. So when they finally got together, as big a fight as it was, that it was one of the all-time largest pay-per-view fights ever. It was sort of anticlimactic. The fight wasn't very close. And Mayweather pretty much handled Pacquiao without ever really being in any danger of getting hurt or knocked out or whatever. And I think a lot of us were kind of disappointed because we were hoping for many more fireworks between the two guys, and we nobody got that. Nobody got what they wanted because I think both guys, at that point, Pacquiao was in his upper 30s, and Mayweather was approaching his mid 30s, and their best fights had really passed them by. So yeah, I mean, a lot of build up, a lot of talk, a lot of social media going into that fight, but it really wasn't the anticipated great matchup that everybody really wanted between the two guys.
I think that Mayweather, he like a showman, he a defensive fighter and stuff, that's why he never lost a fight. I remember I remember he was in WWE one time, he was fighting the Big Show and he had knocked him out with his knuckles and everything. I think like the Jake Paul fight and the Anthony Joshua fight, I think it's so stupid how they be having all these exhibition fights in boxing now. I don't understand that at all. It's like they're making a mockery of the boxing industry right now with all these fights. Like, but I think Terrence Crawford, he the greatest boxer of all time as well because he beat Alvarez and everything, and he had won all his stuff eventually. And I don't know what fight he gonna have next. What are your thoughts on it? Go ahead.
Well, we had actually done a couple of Terrence Crawford's fight, meaning Showtime, which I was affiliated with Showtime Championship Boxing for over 35 years. And we did Terrence's fight against Errol Spence. That was a highly anticipated matchup between those two guys. And we really thought that Errol Spence, who had pretty much dominated, most of the weight class that he was fighting in, whether it was 147 or 154, he had pretty much, cleaned up most of that division. And yeah, I mean, Errol Spence was a Showtime guy. Terrence had just kind of left his HBO deal, or he was at the tail end of his HBO deal. And so that was a highly anticipated fight. So when Terrence handled Spence, we were stunned. I mean, we really we thought it was going to be a challenge for Terrence to move up because, he was basically a 140 pounder moving up to 47, or I don't remember whether they fought that fight at 47 or 54. But yeah, and when Terrence fought Alvarez, um, I think that he just caught Canelo just at the right time. And I think Canelo, he's been resting on his laurels for a long time. He's had a bunch of just, substandard fights against substandard fighters. And coming up against Terrence Crawford, Terrence went in there willing to make a point. And I don't think Canelo was ready for that. So Terrence showed Canelo that he's a true boxer and a true champion of the sport, and more power to him for that terrific performance.
You know what's crazy? Terrence Crawford was the underdog. Then nobody believed that he was gonna win. They thought Alvarez. Everybody was choosing him. And Timothy Bradley, he was on the ESPN broadcast for Sports Center. And he was like, people sleeping on Crawford. He gonna go in there and win. And then you had Max Kellerman. He not at ESPN. He was covering he was covering the fight as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like anything else. Canelo fought as high as light heavyweight. He got up to almost 175 pounds when he fought Arthur Beterbiev. But Arthur Beterbiev was a natural light heavyweight. He had the reach advantage on Canelo. He had a height advantage on Canelo, and he gave Canelo a boxing lesson. And I think that Terrence Crawford, who was a um, consummate fighter, quite frankly, he studied that, and I think that he employed those tactics plus everything that he brought into the game himself. fighting Canelo. And quite frankly, Canelo didn't have any answers for him whatsoever. And the real thing was if you can keep Canelo at bay with a jab, which Terrence has an excellent jab, and be mobile, right? I mean, if you go back to when Canelo first kind of hit the map fighting against Floyd Mayweather just was so mobile and so quick and so fast that Canelo just wasn't able to match that. And so, like almost 10 years later, Crawford comes along and Crawford employs a lot of the same tactics and made Canelo look like, he just didn't have a plan. And I think that's why, Crawford is right now, pound for pound, the best fighter out there.
Exactly. But how has sports television production changed from your early days of ABC Sports to today, especially regarding technology like instant replays?
Well, it's amazing. When I first started in the business, we were using what was called 2-inch videotape machines. And the reels themselves were, like a huge box that you were carrying around that weighed almost 50 pounds. So those reels we would bring into the shows and we would record on these large machines that were in the mobile units and very antiquated. You really couldn't do um, much more than just take a replay back and show it slow-mo, but it was like you couldn't even change the speed that easily. And those machines broke down constantly. So I've watched in my 40 years where we went from these huge 2-inch reels to like a small little drive, right, that can carry, you know, terabytes of video content on them, and we can upload it to what's called an EVS machine, which is basically a digital storage device. And that digital storage device you can have as many as, depending on the kind of software you're using, you can have as many as 6 different camera angles or more coming into each of those machines. So that if you've got 30 or 40 cameras set up in a stadium or an arena, that box, that EVS device can record all these different what's called inputs, all these different elements, camera angles or whatever. And so it's amazing. It really is truly amazing to see where the industry has come in that regard. And the other thing too is that with the EVS devices that we use on for replays, you can go back right after a play happens, or right after a basket happens, or right after a punch happens, and go back and look at that and see what went on, what led up to it, while the action is still going on. Okay. So if I'm the producer in a truck, and let's say I'm doing an NFL football game, and someone just scored a touchdown, I have several, different angles that I'm looking at, and I'm asking the operators, each of the EVS operators, what's the best look, because this is what I want to go to. Or if I know my pattern, if I know my replay pattern, I have, let's say, a thought process as to how I want to do my replays. I want to go wide first and then all the way down to like a very tight shot, unless there's the touchdown is in question. And then we look for the very best angle that shows whether a foot was in bounds or whether the guy had control. And again, all this is happening at the same time, and the machine is still recording, but I can go back and watch these things. 30, 40 years ago, I wasn't able to do that. 30, 40 years ago, using that videotape, once you had a tape machine stop recording or stop to show you something, it didn't record anything further. And the only time it picked up again was after you rolled the replay, and then they would go back into record and pick it up wherever the show is at that moment. So really fascinating and quite amazing the capabilities of slow-mo replays today in television.
Well, I don't understand why they don't like have it in like high school sports stuff with all the technology and stuff. It's like why we can't use it at all levels, uh,
Well,
to
I
get
mean,
the plays
this
right,
equipment, yeah, this equipment, Dion, is not inexpensive. It is very expensive.
So that's
I
why at the high school level they don't like. I was watching a game, I'm in Chicago. They got the IHSA football championship going on. And
mhm.
they be having plays where it's like it's easy to call. You don't even need replay. It's like sometimes calls are just like obvious. And that's why sometimes they have like the drone camera in the NFL, and then the NBA they give you like three challenges. And you could just press the button and stuff. It's like the NFL when you challenge the play and stuff.
Well, each league has each professional league, I should say, has their own kind of like nerve center where any replay challenge or a challenge to a call can be seen by people that are set up either in the stadium itself or in the main offices where they are, where every game that's going on comes into like that nerve center. And I know you've seen it on NBA games where you see that they have a huge setup. I believe it's in Secaucus, New Jersey, and their league officials or head officials are in there watching every single game go on all at the same time. And so most of the time they get it right. Every once in a while they get it wrong. It's rare though. I mean, I think the good thing is that everyone now understands that they have the ability to try to correct improper calls or mistakes that were made either on the court or on the field or whatever. And instant replay, while it's been a huge bonus to the viewer, I still think it's got a long ways to go because sometimes it just takes way too long for people to figure out what it is they're looking at and how to determine what the next steps are going to be for that play.
Yeah, but they human though. They ain't like robots like Major League Baseball. They experiment with robot like umpires and all that stuff now. And I think it's going at the minor league level. It's going to be at the professional level probably next year. I think that and people be getting death threats as well. These people that miss calls, especially if they obvious they family be getting death threats. I don't approve of that at all. But I'm all about getting the calls right.
Well, there are some fanatics that are out there that they take the game a little bit too seriously. Some of that may be because people are wagering on the game, and and they stand to lose a lot of money if the calls don't go their way. Um, but be that as it may, it's still a work in progress on many levels, on each different professional sport. It's still a work in progress. Matter of fact, I was watching a college football game the other day, and I think it was on ESPN, and they actually were able to show you the place where they were actually looking at a call from that game, and you could hear the conversation going on between the referee and the official at whatever center they were looking at. They were set up to watch the game, and you could hear that conversation go on between the official and the center, and it actually was a great little viewing effort by ESPN, and I believe it might have been the SEC conference or the ACC conference
Yeah,
to like.
it's the ACC network. Yeah, the ACC they got their own people and stuff. So I think maybe was it the Virginia Tech and Virginia Hokie game,
Mm.
or was it
I don't remember which game. I don't
the
remember the game, but I do remember that that I had not seen that before. I had not seen
Yeah.
that kind of like little, close up look on how, they were going to figure out what that call for that play was. But I thought as a viewer, it was a nice little insight as to how they determine what they're going to do and what the call they were going to make and what was the time on the clock and where's the ball going to be at on the field. And I thought all of that was really good to watch as a viewer and as a fan.
Exactly. So let's talk about your Emmys, man. Which are the four Emmy Awards you have won holds the most significance to you and why?
I think the first one, the very first one was in 1988, and I was working on the Olympics for NBC in Seoul, Korea, the Summer Games in 1988. And I was an associate director at that point. I was working on track and field with my producer was a gentleman by the name of John Gonzalez, who was a longtime NBC producer and director. And my director was a gentleman by the name of Andy Rosenberg, who had worked, both of them were staff members at NBC at the time, and I was a freelancer. But I had done a lot of track and field events with them leading up to the 1988 Olympics. And so when they hired me to join their group, I was not like a person that was on staff. So that was a little bit different. The venue like track and field, which is one of the most highly viewed venues for any Summer Olympic Games, was a prize. That was a really special place to be at, whether it was track and field or swimming or gymnastics or to a lesser extent, sports that became big later on, like, basketball or what have you. Track and field was one of the premier Olympic events to cover. And so that very first one in 1988, I think had a really special moment. And I went to the ceremony, and while they didn't hand me my Emmy, it was just wonderful to know that you were acknowledged and that I remember getting the Emmy delivered to me, to my apartment, and the box, and it was really well sealed and everything. And when I took it out and I saw my name inscribed on it, that was a very special moment.
Yeah, you're an Emmy Award winner. And everybody really like Raymond. Are you on like the Walk of Fame or something? Your name?
No, maybe only in my head, but no, I'm not.
Because I was gonna say you got to go to LA. We got to get Raymond Smaltz on the Walk of Fame. So they always will remember you.
Yeah, well, maybe if I get my first run TV show and I last for 10 years, maybe it'll happen then, but I'm not sure it's gonna that's gonna
Okay.
that's a viable situation.
Well, nowadays with the TV industry, you may get like 5 years. Because the neighborhood get canceled after 8 years. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard to stay on TV these days.
Yeah, but in all the years that I've been involved with television sports, I think always the Olympics are always very exciting. Um, and I've done like a dozen of them between the summer and the Winter Olympics. Um, and I believe that I think the one award that I did, other than an Emmy award, I did win an IOC, International Olympic Committee award for the production that I was involved in of weightlifting in Atlanta in 1996. And that award was a worldwide award, and it came also with a stipend. So my director and I, we both won the IOC. We got an IOC statue with the Olympic rings on it, with our names inscribed on the award, and we also won a several $1,000 stipend. So out of all the awards I've won, I think that one holds the highest standing for me because, it was achieved during an Olympic production, which is, as large a production as you'll ever be involved in.
Well, yeah, now they got Mike Tirico and Maria Taylor. They be covering the Olympics on NBC now, right now. So, could you share a memorable behind the scenes story from you working on the Olympics and also NFL on Fox? 'Cause I know Michael Strahan, you got Terry Bradshaw. How long did you work with those guys, or it was other people?
During my time at NFL on Fox, I was there when it first started, which was the first season was 1994, and my last season there was 2010. And during that period, I think the pregame show started with James Brown and Terry Bradshaw, Howie Long, and Jimmy Johnson. Michael Strahan came years later after the New York Giants won the Super Bowl in 2007. So he was there in my last couple of years of working with Fox. But those guys worked on the pregame and halftime and postgame shows, and they were all, that was coming out of LA. So we only really got a chance to kind of see the entire staff maybe once uh, during the year when we had our summer session where everybody would come together to talk about what we're going to do for the following season. So if the season starts in September, we got together in either, July or maybe early August, and we had a seminar leading up to that season. And that's where, you got a chance to sit and maybe chat with a John Madden or a Pat Summerall or a Matt Millen. I mean, all those, icons of sports television for NFL football, they were all working at Fox there at the beginning of our time. And people like Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. And I mean, Troy came later. Joe Buck was there, but Joe Buck wasn't the big time play-by-play guy he eventually became. And some of the guys that I work with on my games were people like Kurt Menefee, who is now the host of their pregame, halftime, and postgame show. Brian Baldinger, who has his own segments that he does on social media, and he does a lot of work for the NFL Network. Jesse James Palmer was one of the first times he ever did any network television. We had him doing a few football games at Fox, and I can recall that I remember going to my superiors at Fox, and after working with him on two or three different games, I said to them, and remember, Jesse James Palmer was on The Bachelor, which was a series that was on Fox.
Yeah,
Uh,
he the host now. Ain't that crazy? He was on there and now he the
yeah,
host.
yeah, and I said to my superiors, I said, look, forget about The Bachelor. This guy is legit. He is going to be a very good announcer. And, you could spot that, even after two or three games working with him. And so he blew up. ESPN hired him. Fox did not hire him. ESPN hired him, and he blew up to be one of the best color analysts out there.
Well, yeah, he do college football with Joe Tessitore. You know Joe Tessitore do WWE. He do WWE on I think Mondays. Cause he work on the road for ESPN, so he still do boxing. How many jobs do some of these people get? To be honest, they got like 80 jobs. It's like
Well,
give some of your load to somebody else.
it's like the old saying goes that from the 70s, if you're hot, you're hot, and if you're doing well and people like you, well then you got to do your best to take advantage of that because you only have but so many years of being able to do that job if you're good at it. Um, if I
Exactly.
go if I go back to an Olympic experience, I want to say that I worked on the 1984 Summer Olympics for ABC Sports. And that was the first one that I worked on. And we were there at track and field when Carl Lewis won the four gold medals. I mean, that was the first time that had been done since Jesse Owens did the feat in 1936 during the war. And but I think one of the most special moments for me was Edwin Moses was competing in 1984 in the 400-meter hurdles, and he was near the end of his career, and he had made the final, but he was so wiped out at the end of the 400 meter semifinal that he literally could not get up off the infield. He was just, resting and just relaxing and trying to get his energy back. And ABC wanted to interview him right away. Like we wanted an interview with him right away. And Edwin kept telling everybody, no, 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 no. And I happen to be good friends with a friend of Edwin's. Matter of fact, his friend was named Guy Abrahams. And Guy Abrahams worked for ABC Sports back then. And he and Edwin were buddies. They both competed in the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. Okay. And that's where they got to know each other. And so I ABC wanted an interview with him desperately, and it wasn't going to be live, so that was that whole opportunity left. And then I told my producer, I said, "Well, look, I can go down and I can get an interview with Edwin." Now I had no idea that I was going to be able to convince Edwin to do an interview with us, because he had blown everybody off. But I said, I think I can do it now. I ran out of the truck, ran to the infield at the Coliseum, and I went to Edwin and I said to him, hey, Edwin, I'm good buddies with Guy. I mean, ABC desperately wants to talk to you, man, because this was a record-setting, win for him, and he was now going to be the favorite going into the finals. And Edwin said, "Okay, give me a minute," and we got the interview. And so I was like a big time celebrity for maybe a day or two at ABC because I got the interview with Edwin Moses.
Yeah, who you think the best runner, Usain Bolt or Carl Lewis? Who you think win that race?
I think there was nobody that could defeat Usain. Usain was a phenomena. He was a very tall sprinter, and Carl was a tall sprinter. Not all 100 meter, 200 meter sprinters were tall during Carl's era. So he was a little bit of a unicorn in that regard. But then, when Usain started hitting the scene in the 90s, man, I mean, he could just eat up more track than anybody that I've ever seen. And I've seen, the best of them, whether it was Carl or whether it was Ben Johnson or uh, Justin Gatlin, or, all of those sprinters, even the other Jamaican sprinters that were up there with Usain Bolt, they still couldn't touch him. He was he was unique and he was the best as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well said. So, what inspired you to co-host the Wake Up uh Newbie Tigers podcast, and what do you hope listeners take away from it?
Well, it's interesting. M- some of my friends from college, so I attended Princeton for about 3 years, and many of us have stayed in
Yeah,
touch
you
in
smarty
contact.
pants, you Ivy League guy. You too smart.
Yeah, well, I've still got a wonderful group of friends from my time there at Princeton. And during COVID in 2020, I had actually at that point lost contact with a lot of folks. But during COVID, I had reached out to one of them, and they let me know that, hey, Ray, we do a Zoom with our group. A lot of folks who were upper class people that I knew, and why don't you join? So they sent me the link, and every 2 weeks during COVID, everybody was always in touch because we were feeding each other a lot of information about, the virus itself and the best vaccines for the virus. because some of my friends were doctors and they were, physicians who had a lot of insight for their, for their clientele. And so one of the people that I got to know, who I didn't know at Princeton, but she attended, but she lived off campus. Her name was Professor Michelle Jacobs. She was a law professor. She spent time at um, Howard University, University of Florida, and a couple of other places. And so she and I got together, and our friend said, "Well, we should try to do a podcast to like help inform, the people about, especially in the Black and Brown communities, about COVID, and try to dispel the myths about vaccines that was rampant in the Black community." And so Michelle and I started the podcast in 2020, and early on, a lot of it was mostly about COVID and all of the issues that were in and around COVID and how they were affecting people in Black and Brown communities. And so we had doctors on, we had social workers, and then we expanded it. We expanded it to other people, Black and Brown and Native American people and Asian folks who could help us understand their communities and have our people that were our listeners in the Black community learn more about the Hispanic community in this area of the United States, or the Asian community in this area of the United States, or areas of the United States. And so we average maybe about 6 to 8 episodes a season. We don't do something monthly or every 2 weeks. I know some folks do podcasts, a lot more frequently. It's really hard to get guests on where you're not paying them. I mean, it's a lot easier to get guests when you're paying them, but we've managed over the years to get some wonderful guests for our podcast and to deal with some really very important topics for our community. And we've had a lot of very good feedback. We're not big. We don't have a huge amount of subscribers to our YouTube page or on Spotify or the other platforms that it's on. But we enjoy the research and we enjoy the interviews. And everyone that has ever listened to any of our podcasts have always had very nothing but positive things to say about
Well, Raymond, I'll come on your podcast, man. What do you want me to talk about?
it. Well, we can talk about that off camera, Dion. How about
Okay,
that?
I get. He like, don't put our business in these streets, man. What you doing?
I got you. I got you.
So, is there a particular project that you want to do that you haven't did yet?
Well, because of my Olympic background, I really am excited, and I hope to have an opportunity to maybe work on the next Summer Games in 2028, which is going to take place in, of all places, Los Angeles. So, it would be like full circle for me
You
working
did
on.
you diss in LA because you live in New York. That's a diss track, man. Like Drake and Kendrick Lamar, man.
Well, it's the unique thing about it is that I worked on the Olympic Games in 1984 in the United States in the summer of 84. And then it would be really almost a full circle opportunity for me to work on the Los Angeles Games in 2028. Um, because, hey, look, I've been there and I've done that. I mean, I was there I did the Olympic trials and the Olympic Games. So LA was my home for literally a month and a half back in 1984. So, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope to have some sort of role going into the 2028 Olympics.
Yeah, NBC. You know what to do, man. But you know what's
Yeah,
crazy? You know what's crazy, Raymond? I want to interview Caitlin Ahashi. You know Caitlin? She
say it
a
again.
gymnast. Caitlin Ohashi.
Don't know him. Well, don't
Yeah,
know.
no, it was a woman. She was a gymnastics, the Olympic
Uh,
gymnastic, you had Simone Biles. I had reached out to her a while ago. I've been trying to get me a gymnastic person to interview.
mhm.
Yeah, but have you talked to anybody in the gymnastics world?
Well, I have a really dear friend. Her name is Wendy Hilliard, and Wendy was a rhythmic gymnastics person. And Wendy has a foundation in New York City that she's been running for many, many years. And we actually had Wendy on as a guest last year when we were talking about Black women in sports. And Wendy was a wonderful guest. And you can go, as a matter of fact, you can look her up on her. She has a foundation, has a website, Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics. You can just look that up. And she'd be an excellent person to try and speak with because her uh, her group has put several different gymnastic athletes into the Junior Olympic and Olympic program. So Wendy would be an excellent person to talk to about.
Yeah, we'll discuss that offline though, man. But I get some guests I want to talk to you about that I want to have on within this week, maybe, or or next week, man.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you elaborate on your experiences in the challenge you discussed in your book called "The Young, Black, and Privileged in an Unexpected Place of Privilege"?
Yeah, it was one of my very closest and dear friends from uh, middle school and high school at Dalton, uh, Mark Robinson. We got together along with a third buddy of ours, Chris Rose, and after many many years of not being in touch with each other, um, social media, Facebook began in I think it was 2009. And at that point, the guys reached out to me. They found me, or I found them. I'm not sure who found who, but we ended up getting together at a restaurant in Westchester County, and we hadn't seen each other for decades, and so it was wonderful just catching up with them after so many years of not speaking and what have you. And at some point, we were talking about all of our own personal stories at Dalton. And at that point, we said, you know what? Maybe we ought to write a book about our experiences so that the next generation of, especially young Black boys that are going through private school, can read it and get a sense of a lot of the things that they're going through today were the same things that we went through 40 years earlier, back in the late 60s or early 70s. And so we started out to write a book together. Chris later on had a very tragic passing in his family, and so his availability became compromised, and he needed to deal with some personal things. So Mark and I kind of like picked up the baton and went and we finished the book together. And but it took many many years because I don't even think like we started writing it at some point in 2009, but we didn't get it published until 2021. And we had gone through a couple of different publishers or literary agents who didn't like the fact that I wrote my section by myself and Mark wrote his section by himself. And they thought that it needed to have one person to like write both of our stories. Well, we rejected that and we didn't think that was the case. And so we decided to self-publish. Mark, who was a natural writer, that was his background. I'm not. He was really fundamental in getting that project completed. And if it wasn't for him, I never would even finished. So at that point, when we finally got it to the to finalizing it, we did it through Amazon. And anyone that is interested in publishing a book, you can, Amazon has all the tools that you can self-publish your own book, and that was kind of like the way it went.
Well, that's good, man. That's good. Yeah, all y'all get back together and stuff, And you know what's crazy? I didn't even go to my high school reunion because I didn't even know where it was at. I'm like, where was the high school reunion at, guys? Y'all forgot about me.
Well, it was, if it wasn't for Mark, I wouldn't even have attended one of my high school reunions because I just basically had no interest in going back to my private school because of, I had a lot of personal things that happened there that I wasn't fond of, or they were bad memories. And so there was no need. I just didn't feel a need to engage. But Mark was able to kind of convince me that it was worth my while. And so I think I went to my 35th reunion, and a lot of people that I went to school with were there. And, I had a much better time than I ever thought I was going to have. But it also allowed me to think back on my experiences at Dalton and tap back into my memory about things that had happened, that when Mark and I started to write the book, a lot of things began to be triggered after the reunion that we had come together on. And so yeah, so that was kind of like a bittersweet opportunity for me. I haven't been back since. I only went to that one reunion, and I don't know. Maybe I'll go to my 50th if I'm still around. We'll see.
You know what's crazy? At every reunion is always somebody that look different. Like it may be a guy and he may turn into a woman. They're like, man, Michael, and he like, my name's Monique now.
Well, that's a personal choice, and I am for anyone to find themselves and find out who they are and who they choose to be. And if it works for them, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great having you on today, Raymond, and we'll do this again, man.
Thank you very much for having me, Dion. I appreciate it.